will help you. And I'd like to invite on stage our moderator for today, Bruce Herbert from Texas A&M University.
Thanks, Amy. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We can see you.
Outstanding. Well, I'm stepping in as a moderator today, which is very exciting. We have a great series of talks, and I hope you all enjoy it. Anytime you have a question, please remember to use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature, a little bit easier. And I'd like to thank our sponsors for Expert Finders Conference. Gold level sponsors include Elsevier and Digital Science, great companies doing great stuff. And silver sponsors, also great companies doing great stuff, Ex Libris and Clarivate. So today, our first keynote is Anthony Boccanfuso, who is president and CEO of UIDP. And he's going to talk about using data and the human touch to find effective partners. And Anthony, maybe you could hit your cam on and mic on. There you are. And you should be, how are you doing, Anthony?
Doing all right. Good to see you. Hello, SEC friend, so good to see you.
Yes. Ah, there you go. Absolutely. As long as you're not a fan of Alabama, I'm okay with you.
Well, my daughter's a graduate,
Anthony,
so.
Yes. When you're ready, just why don't we
Sure.
start and stay on time.
Great.
So just hit the share your screens and take it away.
All right. Well, just give me 1 second here, and I'll.
Yeah. No worries at all.
Okay. Can you all see that? All right.
Yep. Working great.
Okay. Well, once again, I want to thank the host for inviting me to give a talk today as part of this event. It's always great to talk about collaborations and partnerships. And, my talk is probably going to be a little different than maybe some of the other things you've heard today. As was mentioned, my name is Tony Boccanfuso. I'm a PhD chemist by training, but I've been now an association executive for 13 years. This is my 14th, which is hard to believe, but I have spent a lot of my career in academia. I worked a couple different institutions in the offices of research, leading research activities. And so really pleased to be with you all today. I put together a slide deck that I think will convey some of my organization's perspectives around collaborations and partnerships. And I look forward to a robust and engaging dialogue toward the end. So let me just start off by telling you all about the organization that I represent, UIDP. Many of your organizations are probably members of UIDP, and you may not know about it. While our membership is institutional, the typical person who participates is someone from the Office of Research, or maybe someone from corporate relations, career services people, faculty members, maybe associate deans of research. Our focus is really on strengthening collaborations between the university and corporate sectors and finding better ways to partner. So we don't really, we don't do policy work, we don't lobby. We're really focusing on business processes and ways to strengthen collaborations. So just a little bit more information about our group. And, I would encourage any of you, if you want to learn more, just go to our website and you can see a lot about the work that we've done. We have a public-facing website, and we also have a members only. And we have a members list if you're not sure if you're a member and you want to learn more about our activities. Okay, so let me move on to the topics for today. So you all mentioned Elsevier being one of your gold sponsors. Elsevier is very active in our group as well. And I think we all know that whether it's Elsevier or some of these other sponsors that you have, that data can be incredibly important to providing objective information on the strengths and weaknesses of communities and areas, and really then help direct you as to where you might want to look for partners, collaboration, where you should be making strategic research investments, where you should be doing faculty hiring, should you be building more facilities in a certain area. So, data is really powerful. And, I put up just a couple of examples of reports that I've used in the past where, Elsevier has presented in these reports data on the strengths of the innovation ecosystem, for example, in Amsterdam. And so, that is very powerful and very useful. I mentioned I used to be in several research offices, and we would get requests from faculty members all the time about, if you give us some money, as an investment in this area. We could be world class. Well, we really had to depend upon the faculty members and their information that they would share with us to determine whether or not it was valid or not. And I wish back when I was at a university that I would have had access to some of the tools that you all have access to today to really help make more informed decisions. And so, I think data is incredibly important, but I would also point out that, organizations don't collaborate. It's really people that collaborate. And so I'm going to spend the bulk of my time talking around how personal relationships are really keys to university industry collaborations. Back about 10 years ago, our organization put together a guidebook written for faculty researchers and for company researchers on how to build relationships between the two sectors. This work was actually funded by the NSF and the Department of Defense. This is a publicly available document, so whether you're a member of our group or not, you can gain access to this, and I readily encourage you to make use of this. We have had tens of thousands of copies of this downloaded, and also we've given out many print copies. And, while data may point you to work together, whether it's between two universities or two companies or a company and a university, the people have to gel, and there have to be things that work between them to lead to a successful collaboration. And this guidebook that I'm putting up here was written by 40 different individuals from all different walks of life, talking about their understanding and learnings around how to build effective collaborations. So I wanted to put a plug in for this. I think this is a great resource for you to share within your own community. It really gives a lot of great insights on ways to build strategic collaborations. So I want to start with this point, and I might refer back to it. When you think about building partnerships between companies and universities, so if you're in Austin, Texas, Bruce, I know you're Texas A&M, but I'll do some balance here and I'll talk about University of Texas at Austin, right? If you're in Austin and Dell is in your backyard and you're obviously natural partners, it's really important that the things that you try to propose that you work collaboratively on are in areas where you have a shared interest. So, Dell isn't going to work with University of Texas, unless it's in an area of interest to Dell, and vice versa. Dell's only, UT Austin should work with Dell only in areas where they have an interest. So it's really important to keep in mind that great partnerships start with shared interests. This next slide shows some work that we did back also around 10 years ago, based on some work that Hewlett-Packard did, where they looked at all the ways that they engage with universities. And I think if you look at this chart, it's really just meant to reflect that there are a myriad of ways for companies and universities to partner. And if you're in career services, you tend to think about workforce issues, but people in research tend to think about research collaborations. People in advancement tend to think about philanthropy, right? So people from different walks of life think differently about ways to partner. Another way of looking at this in terms of ways to be strategically engaged is to look at this Venn diagram and think about the various modalities for engagement, right? So there's faculty engagement, access to university resources, involvement with centers of expertise or schools, entrepreneurial activities, and student-oriented engagement. And all of these can culminate into strategic partnerships between companies and universities. So I visit a lot of universities. Well, I certainly used to visit a lot of universities prior to COVID. And I'm actually going next week for my first visit to a campus in over a year. But if I talk to 100 university presidents or 100 university provosts and I said, do you want to strengthen your industry engagement program? Do you want to do more with companies? Almost all of them would raise their hand and say, yes, we want to do more with companies across that whole partnership continuum that I just put up on that slide. But when you think about doing engagement, it's just like anything else in life. You can have a want to, but you have to also have specific steps that you're going to undertake to do that. So, I'm a little bit I'm a little bit heavier than I'd like to be. I work out 6 days a week. If I wanted to lose additional weight, I'd probably have to eat less bread and maybe some less pasta. Probably not going to happen though. So, while I may want to lose 15 pounds, for me to do that, I'd have to change my diet. And so while I work out, I don't change my diet. So it's same is true in this case with universities. If you're a university and you want to have a stronger industry engagement program, there are specific things that you have to do to make that happen. So I want to talk about some of those things that I've thought about and I've learned on my journeys across university campuses and in talking with corporate leaders from around the country. So, as I mentioned, there are specific actions that are required to become a more industry engaged university. So what are some of these, right? What does it take to be an industry engaged organization? Well, I think if you look at some schools that are doing really great in terms of corporate partnerships, their leadership is clearly articulating a vision. So here's Mitch Daniels from Purdue, here's Michael Crow from Arizona State. If you work at Purdue or you work at Arizona State, you understand that the leadership of the universities are very interested and vested in ensuring that the entire community has a clear understanding of what they're looking for in terms of collaborations. And so, all you have to do is visit these campuses, talk to staff at these campuses, and I think they could clearly articulate what the leadership is expressing as it relates to collaborations with the corporate sector. So I think that's really important, that people not only have it, have a vision, but that they share that with the people that are working across campus. Another specific area that's, I think, really important, has taken on a lot more interest in the last few years, are promotion and tenure criteria. Faculty are very smart people. If you have rewards and incentives for them to collaborate, guess what? They'll do it. And so, if you look at Texas A&M, Bruce's home institution, in the College of Engineering, faculty for, I think, at least a decade now, have been given credit for collaborations with industry. And so if you reward faculty for collaborations, guess what? They'll respond appropriately. In fact, there's an entire effort right now called PTIE. You can just Google ptie.org, being led by Oregon State. This is funded by the National Science Foundation, looking at how entrepreneurial activities, collaborations with industry can be effectively brought into tenure and promotion criteria. So, if you're interested in thinking about specific steps, this is one that is gaining some traction nationally. Another common area of interest for companies is having access to specialized equipment and facilities at universities. And so, a question I would ask of all of you on the phone or on this remote session is, how accessible are your facilities to small, mid-sized companies located in your community, or large companies? And, many times these facilities may be available for companies to lease or pay for use of, but you don't necessarily advertise it or promote it, and they may not even know that you have facilities that are available for use. So this is another one of those pieces of that mosaic when you think about being an industry engaged university that I think is really important. Another really big issue is around contracting and research contracting approaches. Companies fret over how long it takes for them to get contracts into place with universities. And so many universities have invested significant resources in really evolving their approach to contracting. And I would encourage you, if once again, y'all may not be in the research contracting space, but this is an important issue for companies. Something that's really new and novel that we're seeing is joint employment of faculty researchers with large companies. This is happening mostly in the computer science space. We recently issued a report on this topic where representatives from Microsoft, Apple, Intel, VMware, and research leaders from UCSD, UW, Northwestern, and Drexel talked about their shared experiences in sharing faculty members long-term. So this isn't a one-year sabbatical type arrangement or a 2-year leave. This is where a faculty member may be hired at a university, and maybe in year 8 or 9, their employment goes from being a full FTE to 0.51, and then they can work basically half-time at the company, have their own research lab. She can have her own staff at both places, and the faculty member is able to retain promotion and tenure rights and apply for grants from NSF or DoD or DARPA or wherever. And also, like I said, have a separate lab at the company where she's able to do work on behalf of the company. So this is kind of the new type of action. Most universities are not prepared currently to do this, but universities that are worried about losing their computer science faculty to companies are looking at this as one approach to retain the talent at some level. So this is something I think we're going to see more of going forward. Another specific example I'll mention is curriculum development. You know, there are companies within our organization that have specialized medical products, for example, that they seek to work with universities in developing curriculum to train people on how to use their equipment in a surgery suite or in other type environments. Does your university allow companies to have some engagement on the curriculum development side? As a university, will you conduct applied research? So, you know, universities tend to focus on basic research, sometimes do use-inspired research. And so, you know, it's a question that I would ask. Some universities have established, set aside research institutes to do applied research, but others even do them within their own departments. And so this is another criteria, just once again, this is an illustration of another criteria of industry engaged universities. Co-location is another growing trend that we're seeing. Now, obviously, I don't know what's going to happen post-COVID, but many campuses, and this is an example from NC State on their Centennial campus, there are growing numbers of universities that are building space with the expectation that academic researchers will be on the same floor as corporate labs, and that there'll be cross-fertilization between those individuals working on campus, between the academic lab and the corporate lab. Many universities are making use of clinical faculty that are workers from industry. You know, there's been a long history of doing this in law schools or medical schools, but you know, can clinical faculty teach classes in engineering or in data science or in other departments where it makes sense? And then I want to talk about this point because this will be one of my last points, specific actions. But how easy is it for a company to figure out how to access your institution? This is a common challenge that companies face when they want to work with universities. They don't know who to talk to, and they go to a website and they may send an email to a general email account. That's not very effective. So many universities have set up dedicated industry engagement groups that have a portal for engaging the institution. Minnesota is one example. MIT has a long-standing program. There are many others. And so this is something worthy of consideration. If you were a small business in the town that your university is located, how easy would it be for the company representative to figure out how to gain access to your institution? So this is a somewhat of a busy slide, but I think it's really important. This slide is the result of about a year-long effort at the UIDP to look at all the various people within companies and universities that have some responsibility for partnerships between the two sectors. And what you'll see is there are a lot of different units that are involved in university corporate engagement. And the question is, how do you effectively manage that? So for some institutions, they have a single point of contact where companies can contact the university and vice versa, where if you're at a university and you want to engage a company, there's an academic engagement group that manages a relationship. And so, you know, the point of this slide is just to show you that this is a very complex issue and that there isn't one person or one office that is involved in university industry collaborations on your campus. All right, so I want to talk for a few minutes about talent. For a lot of companies that work with universities, talent, whether it's students or faculty, is the biggest driver for corporate partnerships. You know, they want to hire your students, they want to access your best minds. And so it's really important to keep in mind that talent is a prime motivator for companies who want to work with universities. All right, moving forward here. You know, let's talk about your own organization and going back to this kind of data concept. You know, when you have collaborations, you need to be true and honest about where your strengths are. So I visit a lot of campuses I mentioned, and they'll throw around the word or phrase world class. We're world class in this area. We're world class in this area or that area. And I think it's really important for universities when they think about doing industry collaborations that they really define what areas they excel in, and that they take a very harsh and critical view of their strengths. And data can be very important here. So, you know, we all know that the national academies and the NRC for years have put out reputational rankings on departments, but data really provides a very objective, dispassionate viewpoint on areas of strength. And, you know, if you have publications coming from your campus that are being highly cited, that have a high impact, that says something about the quality of the work going on at your campus. So I think it's really important that you use data to assess your internal strengths, and that you're honest with companies that you're talking to. Now, while I want to go back to a point I made earlier, which is relevant to this slide, which is as much as your science may align between a company and your university, people matter. And so the people in those areas of strength have to also want to work collaboratively with companies, and they may not. So you may identify 4 or 5 really strong areas on your campus, but only find that there are certain individuals in those departments that are willing to collaborate with industry. And so you should do a good understanding of that prior to engaging companies. Okay, so back to this issue of alignment, right? So you have strengths. When you talk to companies, it's really important to listen to what their company needs are. So, you know, you might be a world-class institution in precision agriculture, but that company may not be interested in precision agriculture. So it's really important that you do your due diligence in advance and that you identify areas of importance for a company if you want to partner with them. So faculty members are very passionate about their research and they love to talk about it. But one of the best pieces of advice that you can give to your colleagues is to talk less and listen more when they're talking about working with external parties. I want to talk about strategic focus on campuses. So a lot of campuses have identified areas of prioritization. And I'm always frustrated, or not, I don't want to say frustrated, but I'm always curious when I see campuses say their strategic priorities are life sciences, energy, and global health. Those are really broad topics. And I really think it makes much better sense to be more limiting on those topics. Think more along the lines of, you know, disaggregating those into segments. So, you know, instead of saying global health, maybe focus on rare diseases or, you know, pandemics or accessibility to medicines, right? Or telemedicine. You know, focus on things that are a little bit more specific. And then the university, once they've identified those priorities, they need to communicate what those are. And then they need to invest in those areas. And then they need to make them a priority. So going back to this idea of data, you know, data can be used to incentivize people who need to work together to make collaborative engagement happen. All right, I want to talk about students because I think, once again, the talent element is really important. Students are really important to collaborations with companies. And we did a survey. We do these short 1-minute surveys all the time, and we did one recently and asked them, what's the most important aspect of university and industry collaborations over the next 6 months? And almost half the respondents said students, because research is wedded to student recruitment. And so this is just really an important area. And so I just think, when you think about this, your strengths of your departments are important to think about when it goes to engagement, and then thinking about how to give access to those students for companies that are looking to partner with you. And really, you're helping the students think about career choices, because as we know, even PhD students, most of them are not going to wind up as faculty members. Most of the PhDs in the STEM disciplines are going to wind up working in industry after they complete their degree. All right, I want to talk about a few more things, and I'm going to wrap up, and I'll be pleased to chat with you and talk and answer any questions you might have or listen to your perspectives. When you think about your existing relationships, for many large research universities, they have a handful of strategic partners, maybe 6 to 5 or 6 strategic industry partners. It's really important that you track and evaluate what those companies are doing on your campus, not just in sponsored research or philanthropy, but student hiring. I know universities are pretty good about knowing where people go on their first job, but less so after that. But it's really important to track where your students are employed and think about how you can leverage that when you think about doing collaborations with companies. And so look at all these issues that are mentioned on this slide: master agreements, gifts, contracts, capstone projects, co-ops, etc. This allows individuals to feel like they have a piece of ownership around some aspect of a university industry strategic collaboration. And so I think that's really important as you think about how you manage relationships with external parties. We recently did work on effective site visits. Many universities will have companies do a visit to their campus, and they may bring a corporate plane, bring 5 or 6 people from the company who represent different units. And we did this report because we heard about really bad experiences that companies had visiting universities. And so we wanted to add some illumination to best practices in this area. And so we put together some simple ground rules, and they're laid out in this report. Just some simple ones. Know the purpose and scope of why the company is visiting with you. Put together a plan with what the intended outcome is. Make sure you understand the current status of the relationship, and then effectively manage expectations. Most companies are not going to commit when they visit to significant investments, especially if that's their first site visit to the campus. So before a company visits your campus, these are some specific steps that you should do, right? Have some pre-read materials. Make sure NDAs are in place, have an effective agenda. Make sure the logistics work out. One of the biggest complaints we heard from companies is they can't find parking on campuses when they come visit, right? So reserve parking spots for them. Use an easy to access location. And if they're a foreign company, make sure that you deal with cultural and language barriers. So after the visit, and I think what you do during the visit is important, what you do before is important, but also what you do after. Make sure there's follow-up both internally and externally, and then document what happened during the visit. Okay, I'm going to wrap up here with just a few closing comments. This is March 2021. If I had given this talk in March 2019, I certainly would not have been talking about the impact of pandemics. Maybe that would have been short-sighted on my part, but we certainly have seen an upheaval in our lives. And while I see some level of optimism in terms of us returning to some level of normalcy, I had my first COVID shot yesterday, and I'm in South Carolina. We're opening to 16-year-olds and above April 15th in terms of getting shots. This certainly is a unique time. So we did another survey of our corporate members, and asked them about industry investments at universities. And this slide shows variance from a 2020 survey to the spring of 2021. and then what they see happening in the fall of 2021. And what you find is that while there was some look at decline in 2020, that there's some hope that things will stabilize beyond. And so, and even seeing some increases where companies are looking to universities to do more with in 2021. So I think we really don't know. This is a little bit of crystal ball looking, but I have some level of optimism coming out of the COVID crisis. And one last slide on COVID. We asked another question for industry members. How likely are you to pursue new partnerships in the next 12 months? And while there certainly is a decline in the very likely category from 2020 to 2021, there's still about 1/3 of the companies that we surveyed that said that they envisioned there being new partnerships in the next year. So some level of optimism for all your campuses. And I hope all of us are able to come out of this healthier and wealthier than we were prior to COVID. All right, I'm going to put a shameless plug in for our next meeting, which is April 12th through 16th. It's a meeting that's taking place online. We're committed to online meetings for the next, the rest of this calendar year. We have a great lineup of people speaking at this event, and the entire agenda and speakers can be found on that site, or you can just Google UIDP Virtual 2021. Okay, so with that, I just want to thank you all. This is some contact information. If you want to contact me directly, my email is tony@uidp.net, and I look forward to talking with you about your perspectives and any other issues you'd like to chat about during this time. So thank you so much, Bruce, and thank you, colleagues.
That was really good, Tony. Maybe you could take a second.
Bruce, we're having trouble with your audio. Bruce, we're having trouble with your audio. You're echoing. I don't know if you have two items connected or not, but.
Nope. Is that better?
Better. You still got an echo, but at least I can understand you.
I don't know. Yeah, Tony. So, if you're in a geology professor in Texas, you can imagine that we spend a lot of time interacting in companies over long periods of time, and I can tell you from long experience, you hit every mark. I was wondering if you were going to get. I'd go through. Okay, I'd do this one and this one and this one, and then your slide would come up, and I went, "Holy crap, that was amazing!" So really good. But you know, I was wondering if you could talk just really briefly. We have just 5 minutes. Just really briefly on two things. At Texas A&M, we are constantly enmeshed in a give and take attention between chasing greater academic reputation among universities and then meeting our land grant mission,
Right.
which is translating research to societal good, which of course in Texas means building our economy.
Right.
And we're always at that tension.
Right.
And I will tell you, through my career, deans have swung back and forth. Some years it's like, how many National Academy of Science winners do you have?
Sure.
Next year is ExxonMobil giving us millions of dollars, right? And it's one or the other. So I was wondering if you have some specific examples, so a case study, of some university that handled that tension well.
Yeah. So, I think, so just a couple of calibration points. If you look at a university's research enterprise, typically around 5 to 7% of their funding comes from industry. And for land grants, it usually is a little bit higher just because of their mission and their scope. If you're in double digits, you're doing something, you have a process in place and a plan in place to engage industry. Nobody has 10% of their funding from industry by happenstance. There has to be structures in place to support that. And, places like Purdue, Penn State, Ohio State, Georgia Tech really have programs in place to effectively engage industry. What I'm going to maybe take the liberty of maybe taking a little bit different angle on your question and answer it this way. The tension that you talk about with deans or provosts or VPRs around reputation and serving the land grant mission or engaging the external community, you are seeing, as I'm seeing, and I'm sure you are as well, that in order to effectively win large federal awards now, you must have industry engagement. And so, all you have to do is look at the ERC program, right? So I think they're in phase 4 now. The original ERC program said, we'd like for you to work with industry. Phase 2 said, you have to have some formal program for engaging industry. By phase 3, they were talking about industry needs to be investing in the program. So, and look at the new NSF director, Ponch, and what he talks about. It's all about partnerships. VPR titles now are changing. So, for example, at Purdue, Teresa Mayer, who used to be at Virginia Tech, her title is Vice President for Research and Partnerships, right? So, for the faculty member or for the provost who says, well, we care about recruiting, National Academy of Engineering members. We care about our reputational rank. We want to be a member of AAU. We want to be, we want to get $1 billion of R&D funding. That's great. You cannot achieve a lot of those goals in today's world without having corporate partners involved strategically as part of those efforts. So it's not an either or, it's how most effectively to engage them.
Yeah, we're working on an NSF proposal right now that that requires that. Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. So, so in the last 1 minute, have you seen campuses that have had some kind of synergistic effects from doing a good job of building better partnerships with industry?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, and you always have to be careful about cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
So, I think, and I think there's a lot of reasons for this, but I'll talk about Georgia Tech for a minute. We were talking during the pre-conference setup. I grew up in Florida. I went to Furman University, which is in South Carolina, right down the street from Georgia Tech in Atlanta. If you look at Georgia Tech back in 1979 when I graduated high school, and you look at it today, there's probably not a university in the United States that has grown in research stature more than Georgia Tech. I mean, you could argue, Texas A&M has done certainly tremendous growth. Arizona State, there are a lot, Central Florida, there are a lot of really great schools that, that have grown their stature. I think Georgia Tech is one, right? And part of it is they're in Atlanta. Atlanta has grown. A lot of companies are located in Atlanta, so they benefited from those effects, but they also really made a strategic effort to engage industry effectively. So they have a separate research institute to do applied research. They have a research corporation to do industry engagement along with other type of activities. So I think, Georgia Tech is a great exemplar. You can go on the Georgia Tech Office of Research website and find all the modalities they use to engage in using contracting mechanisms. So if you just Google Georgia Tech contract continuum, it's based on actually work out of UIDP. It'll talk about all the ways that Georgia Tech will contract with companies. Most universities are not that transparent.
Right.
So, all right, we're out of time. Thank you for having me today. And
I enjoyed it thoroughly. Yeah, it was a really good talk. And